That opening performance from Southampton has almost made me question the way I look at football. And that sounds like a really weird opening statement, but I'm so used to judging. I'd accepted the point where you judge performances nowadays on chances created and denied for the opposition rather than results. For a long time, that's something that's a concept that I became sort of familiar with, and very much aware that you don't just judge teams based on results. But what's really curious for me about tonight is that Southampton, they played such great football in terms of the build-up play down the right-hand side between James Ward-Prowse and Kyle Walker-Peters and Nathan Tella. That was absolutely outstanding, that trio. Hopefully that'll still be in place by 2nd of September. It might not be. And yet you wouldn't necessarily say Southampton created a whole ton of chances. And there's a perspective that said that in terms of clear-cut chances, it was only two. So it's like I feel instinctively compelled to lavish Southampton with praise for the way that they played, and yeah, how exciting they played, and sort of in a way how rare their style of football is at Championship level, even though Russ Martin's managed for a couple of the seasons at this level before now. 80% possession. I mean, how often do you see that at Championship level? And I suppose there's an argument for saying that, are we giving Southampton too much credit because they did only create two clear-cut chances with a massive disparity between these teams in terms of resources and quality of individuals. And they only won it with 8 minutes to spare. So are we giving too much credit to Russ Martin in terms of the style that he plays? I don't think so, though. I think that the number of final third entries Southampton had, and just the patience that they played with, the clear playing identity, the clear patterns of play, the fact that they never went away from plan A, I just feel like there's so much to be admired. And while I find it difficult to pinpoint exactly why I feel compelled to give Southampton so much praise for that opening night performance, despite not necessarily creating a whole ton of clear-cut chances. Just instinctively, it feels that way. I suppose that right hand side is really the exciting thing, because Kyle Walker Peters just seems to have that elite level ability to know what he's going to do with the ball well before he does it, or before he receives it. And I think that's such an exciting thing if he is going to stay at Championship level, because he's a bit of an inverted right back. Certainly not a right back in your traditional sense, but just the way he looks after the ball, the way he consistently makes excellent decisions, I think is so exciting. And then you had we had him sort of drifting infield almost into a midfield role. You had James Ward-Prowse drifting out into the right flank, and that sort of synergy of movement, if you like, created space for Nathan Tella to produce one or two moments of quality. The first of which actually went in, although I think officially it went off Adam Armstrong's head. Not sure I'd be too happy about that if I was Nathan Tella. But yeah, great bit of play it was from Kyle Walker-Peters, and it's sort of created the space for Tella to produce that bit of quality, which we saw him do so often around the edge of the box last season for Burnley. And he's such an exciting one, I think, Nathan Tella, because he's super quick over long distances. I don't know if we're going to see that too often this season because of the way Southampton play under Russ Martin, but he can also wriggle away from defenders. So if you get tight to him, he can go away from you very quickly. If you give him space, he can produce those moments of curling quality, and he nearly adds a second, I think, later in the first half. And then he's also got that ability to kind of wriggle away from people as well. So he's definitely got the potential to be one of the best forwards in the league, as he was last season. So fantastic start for him. So that right hand side, I think, was a real strong point for Southampton tonight. Yeah, I suppose that leads me to question Sheffield Wednesday a little bit. The problem I think the Owls had was that they had Barry Bannon playing as a number 10. They felt like they wanted to get him higher up the pitch because they wanted legs in midfield in the deeper role so that there's enough defensive cover. That was the theory. I think there's certainly a quality issue with Will Vaulks and Tyreek Backinson. I don't think either are good enough for the level. I wouldn't say, yeah, some Sheffield Wednesday fans would stick up for Will Vaulks and say he is championship standard. I don't think so personally, but I certainly don't think Tyreek Backinson is. And yet here they are starting a championship season with those two in midfield. I do think that does lead me to question Sheffield Wednesday on an operational level. And where they are in terms of sort of planning and recruitment, because that does feel like that's questionable. Granted, George Byers was absent for tonight, so that didn't help them. But I think that they brought in a lot of their signings very late in the window, and that's frustrating for me. I think if I was a Wednesdayite, I'd be quite annoyed with my club for that, because they're basically given the footballing operational keys to Darren Moore. And listen, that wasn't the worst decision Chansiri's ever made at Sheffield Wednesday, don't get me wrong. Because I think you'd rather have Darren Moore making your footballing decisions than Chansiri. However, the problem with that comes when Darren Moore left a few weeks after the player final victory over Barnsley, and all of a sudden there's this vacuum of footballing intellect at the football club, and you've got Davon Chansiri, whose background is in tuna production, making the decision as which head coach to appoint. And I think that's not only do you not necessarily have the best process for recruiting your head coach, but then you also have that sort of issue with, well, who's recruiting the players, and it felt like that process was kind of paused a little bit in the interim period, and hence the movements only really happened later in the window, very close to the start of the season. So I don't think any of that has really been ideal. And I would definitely question Sheffield Wednesday's preparation for life in the Championship, that's led to a situation where they're starting their season with Will Vaulks and Tyreek Backinson in midfield. So there's a question mark as to whether Will Vaulks is Championship level. I don't think Tyreek Backinson is Championship level, certainly not in terms of current ability or even potential. And then there's a stylistic fit issue, I think, tonight in terms of what tonight required. You're facing a extreme possession heavy side that's going to have a lot of the ball between their centre backs and along their midfield. For me, if you're going to play with a number 10, you need that number 10 to be a strong runner who loves to go and press. Barry Bannon isn't that, and therefore you had a lot of situations where Southampton were able to play that game on their terms. And again, if I was a Wednesday out, that would frustrate me, because not that you would expect Sheffield Wednesday to get anything out of this game. And like I said at the beginning, I can understand the perspective that actually on paper, it's not a disaster for Sheffield Wednesday to have limited opponents that were Premier League last season to 2 clear-cut chances, and they were on for a point with 8 minutes to play. Not a disaster on paper, but I think that they very easily granted Southampton the opportunity to play this game on their terms. And again, that would frustrate me, because they had Josh Windass, who I think is at his best with those driving forward runs. He was playing left side of midfield. And it's not exactly unheard of for Xisco Munoz, because he's done similar previously. When he first took charge of Watford, he had Ismail Assar playing wide in a 4-4-2. And Ismail Assar is obviously a wide forward, and who needs the freedom to attack in the final third. And I do question Xisco Munoz tactically. And I think Windass seemed to be getting frustrated because he was being asked to do a job defensively that isn't really what he wants to do. And of course, sometimes Sometimes you've got to sacrifice yourself for the team, but for me, it would have been a lot better to have someone like Josh Windass in a more central role, pressing against the opposition and making his presence felt, because Southampton just had it all their own way so easily. Barry Bannon didn't fit. He just looked. He was almost giving up a little bit, Barry Bannon, and not. I know Barry Bannon as a character too well to think that he was actually giving up. It's just, I don't mean it in that way. I just meant he doesn't have the physical capabilities to run all game, especially when the chances of him actually winning the ball back are so low. For me, and I appreciate it's easy to be wise after the event, but I would question Xisco Munoz in terms of his team selection and how you use Barry Bannon. Would it have been better to have Barry Bannon in maybe a deeper position so that you get more legs against the ball? Or would it have been better to have Barry Bannon off the bench as a bit of a wildcard option? Because if you're expecting to have 20-30% of possession, is that necessarily conducive to bringing the best out of Barry Bannon? Now, of course, there's an argument to say that a lot of the signings they've signed late in the window weren't particularly match sharp. So Barry Bannon's Sheffield Wednesday's best player, you've got to play your best player. I understand that argument as well. But for me, playing Windass as the number 10 would have been better. And I suppose I wouldn't have minded the idea of being able to bring on Barry Bannon for half an hour to maybe have an impact on the game that way and make sure that you've got runners against the ball, people going and pressing and being aggressive for the first 60 minutes and giving yourselves a bit more of a foundation to kind of tell Southampton that they're not going to be able to play the game on their terms. And I think what worries me about Xisco Munoz was that after the game, I think it's one thing to acknowledge the gulfing quality between the opposition or acknowledge the challenges that came with the fixture, which I'm sympathetic to as well. But Xisco Munoz's first words when he was asked by the reporter on Sky Sports about the performance was, I think he used the word perfect. I'd be, again, it's a bit of a running theme from this video, really frustrating, I think, because it's like Sheffield Wednesday just didn't make their presence felt this evening, and I feel like there was a tactical setup within their personnel that existed that could have got a bit more out of tonight. I'm not saying they would have got a different result, but I think they could have tested Southampton a lot more and stopped them having these long spells of control. Because they did end up having 27 shots and 6 on target, and I suppose they were forced to shoot from range at times, but it did feel a little bit too easy at times as well for them to play the kind of game that they wanted. I've got to give Sheffield Wednesday credit. Slightly better second half in terms of getting players further forward. I mean, to be honest, we'd seen in the first half there were 1 or 2 bursts where Bannon played a ball in for Callum Patterson to break down the right-hand side, put a good delivery in, and a couple of nervy moments. I think Windass tried to get on the end of it, and Gregory as well. And I think Bannon might have ended up having a shot that just went off target. And then second half, Windass, it was one of those driving runs from Windass when he was able to get up the pitch, won a corner and great delivery from Bannon, or certainly from the left-hand side, and it was Ayor for knocking it down, and Gregory showed great movement, sort of come out of nowhere to poach, and yeah, well done to them. I suppose it was that those couple of moments, the one that I mentioned in the first half, and the goal probably raises the biggest question for me about Southampton, which is defensively defending balls into the box. A couple of moments where they weren't necessarily wholly convincing. I'd like to see Russ Martin try and fine-tune those things, because it was a bit of a theme conceding cheap goals for his side at Swansea, and I think they're going to need to address those issues. But again, they showed the depth that they've got. They brought on Che Adams, of course. They also added Stuart Armstrong in the 10 position, And I think a couple of the subs made a difference. Joe Rebo arguably as well. And it was a lovely move actually. Will Smallbone really controlled things so well in the middle of the park. And then Kyle Walker-Peters involved again, played a lovely ball for that sort of third man run from James Ward-Prowse. I think he just eluded Liam Palmer, who'd come off the bench for the Owls, and then put it across, and it was a nice, neat finish from Che Adams. Yeah, and this is the thing because uh, Southampton had a lot of shots. I think it was 22 actually, and 6 on target. Decent return. Not like they had a ton of clear cut chances, but I think I always had that feeling of faith that eventually their style of play would translate into a chance and a goal, and it did feel for me like I had a kind of quiet confidence that Southampton would find the answers. I suppose the positive for Sheffield Wednesday is the impact Masaba had coming off the bench. He's a winger by trade, but I can see why Xisco Munoz wanted to deploy him down the middle because of that pace and that counter-attacking threat. And we saw him go on a really strong run around the midway point of the second half. And yeah, I think that's an exciting thing for the Owls. Obviously, still a bit of uncertainty for them over squad. I mean, Michael Smith has been linked with Derby, and it could be that there's a few changes between now and the end of the window. But I wanted more from Sheffield Wednesday. I have to say, not that I would have expected them to get a result, but just to have been a little bit more aggressive. From Southampton's point of view, I think there's huge encouragement to be taken from tonight's performance. I thought the style they imposed on their game was so aesthetically pleasing, some great right-sided combination play, and I think they can be really pleased with their night's work. Couple of minor question marks over the defence. I think they'll face more aggressive and better opponents, which will test them further. So I'm not going to go too big too early on them, but I think that's a strong opening performance for Sheffield Wednesday. Plenty of work to be done.